Welcome into another edition of the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels. A very happy Aggie land as we sit here on Thursday morning after Texas A&M basketball pulls off an improbable comeback against Ole Miss on the road. Manny Obaseki with a huge late shot to win it for the Aggies. We're going to talk plenty about that. We're going to talk about a new addition for Mike Elko's staff and talk a little baseball as well with the baseball season around the corner. So, gonna jump right in. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. I'll just jump right into it, man. That game was crazy
Yeah,
last night. Um, it felt like 30 minutes after the game. I'm like, did A&M win that? Are we sure they won that? I'm still baffled that they won that game when you think about 20 turnovers, Wade Taylor, season low 4 points, Taylor and Phelps, who was sick, a combined 8 of 31 from the floor. They were down 11. They were down 8 with 2 minutes left. And thank goodness for Manny Obaseki for the Aggies. And Pharrell Payne also came up huge down the stretch. They both scored all their points in the second half. And just a meltdown for Ole Miss, but also an incredible job by A&M. It's something that we've seen, you might say it's a fluke, but it's something we've seen from this team a lot over the last few years. You think about the Houston comeback in the second round last year, the OU comeback this year, Iowa State a year ago. Like this team, because of how they're coached and because it's a veteran group, they're able to come back and kind of show resilience in these tough spots. So have to give them a lot of credit. And what this win does for them, it's a quad 1A win. They now have 10 quad 1 and quad 2 wins combined, which is tied for the third most in the country. 6 quad 1 wins, tied for the third most in the country. And now 3 quad 1A wins. I know people are like, what's quad 1, quad 2? That's a really good thing to have that many wins. 15-4 in conference play, or 15-4 overall, 4-2 in conference play. This is a team now that's kind of projected to be a 3 seed and maybe a 4 seed. And this win was huge for them. I would say it's the biggest win of the season. And just really impressed by the resilience they showed.
never a quit, man. That's the thing. If you look at this group and you knew coming into the night, and even though they didn't make the tournament last year, this Ole Miss team kind of has that Chris Beard mold already of they're going to grind out games. It's going to usually be kind of low possession defensive battles. That's exactly how last night's game kind of turned out. And it's why Buzz Williams kind of all throughout leading up to the game was talking about it's going to be 1 or 2 possessions here and there, right? It's going to be all the little things. And A&M didn't exactly follow through on that recipe. He talked about turnovers, and A&M turns it over 20 times and is still able to get a win on the road. And you got to be so happy for Manny Obaseki. This is a guy that, we were talking about on the board this morning when you talk about like a highly rated guy that was a 5-star, a fringe 5-star, was right on the cusp of it. And he's really had to kind of battle through some ups and downs, bouts of inconsistency here and there, but he stuck with it. And last night by far goes down as probably his biggest moment that he's had as an Aggie. And I mean, you look at what this could mean for him going forward. If they get him rolling with Zurich Phelps and Wade Taylor, this is a really scary team.
Yeah, I mean, it just has the look of such a different team than what we've seen the last few years. A&M's had some pretty good teams the last few years, but they had the midseason slump. They couldn't get to that second weekend in the tournament. And I think part of that is because they couldn't withstand sort of the anything adversity-wise, whether it's a player going down or you lose a close game and it kind of spirals downward. And you're not seeing that this year. And I think that's because this team is deeper than it's ever been. I mean, Pharrell Payne and Manny Obaseki both come off the bench for this team. And look what they did, a combined 22 points in the second half for them. And it's kind of a your turn, my turn thing with this team where, like, if Wade Taylor, if it's not his night or if he misses 3 games, Zurich Phelps can take over. If Zurich Phelps doesn't do great, Wade Taylor or Emmanuel Vasquez can take over. Hayden Hefner has had a few really good games under his belt. Pharrell Payne, when to begin the season, Pharrell Payne kind of struggled. Henry Coleman was the guy that kind of carried A&M. Well, now Henry Coleman not doing as much now, but Pharrell Payne since December has been pretty dominant. Been a double-digit machine, been making almost every shot he puts up, and so it's kind of one of those deals where even when a couple of your primary players are having bad games, it's a deep enough team where you can just ride who's hot. You can say, okay, Manny, let's see what we have from you. And if he's hot, then ride him. And I think that just speaks to the team that Buzz Williams has assembled, to where you think about in the past, if Jace Carter's struggling from the floor last year, he's having to kind of figure it out and play through it. And, there's not really another option. Hayden Hefner last year didn't have a great year, kind of struggled at times, and A&M didn't really have that parachute to say, okay, let's try someone else. They had to ride that guy. Well, now if someone has a bad game, they can just put somebody else in. We saw it last night. We've seen it all season. And that bodes well for them in the future, because your guys are going to have off nights. Your guys are going to have your 3 for 15 nights. So can you bring somebody else in to give you that spark? And A&M's done it time and again. And when you think about it, this was on the road. This was against an Ole Miss team that began 4-0 in SEC play. They beat Bama. Their only loss was in overtime at Mississippi State, which is a really good team. Ole Miss scored their lowest point total of the season. It was 62 points for them, and it was just another defensive masterclass for A&M. They're 7th in the country now in defensive rating. It's been their calling card all year, and in the last 4 minutes of game time, Ole Miss did not make a shot in that game. And we can talk about, Zurich Phelps coming up big at the end, Emmanuel Vasquez coming up big at the end. But A&M's defense was what really gave them a chance to pull off that comeback, because 62 points, no made shots in the last 4 minutes, just speaks to the job that the assistant coach and defensive coordinator for this team, Devin Johnson, has done. And, if this team's going to make a big run in the tournament, if this team's going to continue the success they had, it's primarily going to be because of their defense. Because, again, a couple guys have a bad night, they're still fine because they're locking guys up, and they've got other guys, they're deep enough to make up for it.
No doubt. Now, challenge for them. Everywhere you can look within the SEC, it's going to be a challenge every single kind of time you go out there. But this one feels a little bit of a unique challenge, because you look at Texas A&M's upcoming road. They play on the road Wednesday night at Ole Miss, final time slot of the night, playing at 8 p.m. They turn around and they got an early game against Texas on Saturday, going on the road again to Austin. Your thoughts on that matchup, and as A&M looks to pull off the season sweep?
Well, going into the Ole Miss game, A&M had 13 games left in the regular season. 9 of them were quad 1. The other 4 were quad 2. Of those 9, 7 of them were quad 1A. And of those 7, 5 of them were on the road. So this is the SEC this year. Every game is freaking really hard. But I really like A&M's upcoming schedule relative to, you speak to the SEC gauntlet and how tough it is. But you look at it. You go at Texas, you beat them by 20. You go home against OU, you beat them on the road without Wade Taylor, right? You go at South Carolina, probably the worst team in the conference. Then you go home against Georgia. They haven't been very good, had a really bad loss against Arkansas. I think they've lost 3 straight. Yeah. And then Arkansas, is that their first win in conference play? They've been horrible.
I think it was their first win. Yep.
Yeah. So that is doing the math, 6-game stretch where And I forgot to include at Missouri. That was another
Yeah.
one in the middle of that stretch between South Carolina and Georgia. That'll probably be your hardest game. Missouri's 22nd in the country. They've been pretty good all year. Other than that Missouri game, you might be favored in the other 5 games. You could go 5-1 in that stretch, and all of a sudden you're 19-5 and 9-3 in conference play. And then if you lose to Auburn and Florida and drop some of these really difficult games that are later in the season,
Yeah.
it's really not that big of a deal. They're going to move back a spot in the net for losing a game like that. So I really think this stretch coming up, if they can go at least 4-2 and hopefully at least 5-1, they'll be in a really good spot to get that high seed, not just in the NCAA tournament, but the SEC tournament as well. And so, yeah, Texas, you mentioned it. I think a couple of things that is going to be difficult. Coming off that kind of late Wednesday night, they get home at 3 a.m. last night, this morning, and then you're playing the early 1:30 p.m. game. That's a tough turnaround, and A&M's definitely a process-oriented team where they're big on their schedule, they're big on their routine, so that can kind of throw them off a little bit. You're going on the road again. It's your rival. It's a team that'll be motivated after losing to you by 20. And then, there still are some concerning things about this team. Wade Taylor, since he's come back, has not looked like himself. A&M has not quite had the fluidity offensively because they're trying to get Taylor back in the mix, but Phelps had the run that he had when Taylor wasn't in the mix. So it's kind of like, do we do my turn, your turn, or how do we kind of flow that? Yeah. Pharrell Payne is somebody they still try to get involved, and that's a balance that they have to play. And we haven't seen Anderson Garcia for a while now rebound at the level that he rebounded last year, and that was a huge thing for this team. So there are still some concerns going forward that you'd like to see them clean up, but they're kind of playing with house money at this point because they've won enough huge games that dropping a game at Texas or dropping another quad game here and there, it's really not going to damage their resume all that much.
No doubt. They sit in a really good spot heading into the final week of January. As we mentioned, Texas on Saturday, home against Oklahoma. Buzz Williams has this team rolling. It's going to be fun to watch them heading into March and late February as well. Switching gears a little bit, right before A&M took on Ole Miss, a little bit of news came out on the football side. We're in the off season, but we're in portal season. We're in coach and change season, and Mike Elko is expected to make an addition to the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. Our Matt Zenitz reported that Lyle Hemphill, the former James Madison defensive coordinator, is expected to head over to College Station to join Mike Elko's staffs. Your thoughts on this hire and bringing him on board?
Yeah, it's fascinating for a few reasons. One, right after the season ended, Mike Elko made some pretty big proclamations about, needing to change the defense and how the defense is going to look a lot different next year after they really struggled toward the end of the year. And you kind of expected some big changes to come with that. And so far, they've not made any major staff changes. They've still got their defensive coordinator, Jay Bateman. They still have their 2 secondary coaches, and Ishmael Aristide and Jordan Peterson. And now you're bringing in a third guy into that group. But the guy they're bringing in, I really like. Lyle Hemphill had a really great year for JMU, top 30 in a lot of the different defensive categories. I think they were, I want to say 21st in scoring defense, 7th in pass efficiency defense, and he's a guy that has experience working with Mike Elko. Coached at Duke for the 2 seasons that he was there. We'll learn a lot more about what he's like as a recruiter, and you could probably speak to that a little bit more. But I think just from a results standpoint, he's a guy that's done it at multiple places, and I think that you wanted there to be some change. So I think he could be the piece to part of the piece of unlocking this defense. We've heard the notion that Elko is going to have more control over the defense, and he's kind of a secondary minded guy. It kind of runs through the secondary. So having three coaches back there and really dedicating to the secondary, I think could be an interesting move. I mean, the secondary struggled toward the end of the year, and certainly the coaching needed to be better. So we'll see. I still think there are more changes that need to be made, and maybe A&M can do a little bit more in the transfer portal, because I do think that the problems that they had defensively were so glaring that they needed big changes.
Yeah.
Mike Elko admitted they couldn't defend the forward pass. They couldn't run a zone defense effectively. From our view, they couldn't tackle, right? They couldn't defend the run. And now you mix all those things together and you're losing Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner. You've got some guys to replace, and you've got some holes to fix. And so they've done a decent job in the portal, but I still think there's more work to do before you can feel optimistic about this defense.
Yeah, for me, one of the things is I kind of find fascinating about this move is I think him and Ishmael Aristide and Jordan Peterson is like, it's kind of a nice blend. And when you look at that, I think Ishmael Aristide is a fantastic recruiter, right? And Jordan Peterson has some real skins on the wall. When you look at Jamar Beal Goins and Kobe Sellers, Adonis Curry raved about him when I talked to him at the All-American Bowl. Now I think you bring in a guy like Eric or Lyle Hemphill that worked with Mike Elko at Duke, kind of has that safety background, has a background now as a defensive coordinator. And you bring that coaching experience into everything that Jordan Peterson and Ishmael Aristide kind of add from a coaching and recruiting standpoint. I think it's a nice blend between those three. You mix in Brian Gross Armiento as well. He's a guy that we've talked quite a bit about in terms of his recruiting, has experience also as a defensive backs coach. So you've got a lot of voices in that room and a lot of guys that can kind of work together and kind of try to get the secondary playing at the level they needed to heading into next year. It's a guy that Mike Elko's familiar with too, and it's a guy that he can trust, and we know that's something he's big on, is guys that he can kind of rely on and to help turn this thing around. And so interested to see what his role is going to be, how it kind of ends up working out. I think those are all kind of open-ended questions that we're going to have to figure out heading into the spring. But I think bringing him in, great addition, really great addition. And you mentioned the transfer portal. A&M's been really active there as well. Second straight cycle, they're putting together a top 10 recruiting cycle on the transfer portal. 14 commitments right now, and a couple late ones that they've made here. They're putting together. Obviously, the receiver room is going to get a lot of discussion between Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion. Obviously, there's some uncertainty right now with Micah Hudson and that situation and just how it's all going to play out. I think you and I have talked about this. It's just one that you're just going to have to let play out and see how it all kind of works itself out. It's uncertain right now, and that's all you can really kind of say about it. But you look at some of the other areas that they've targeted, right? I think they still need another addition along the defensive line. You've got Tyler Onyedim, who has been a really, really good player at Iowa State. You bring him in with DJ Hicks and Albert Regis. I still think you probably need one more interior body. They've added some really intriguing names. When you look at Sam Mpemba, you look at Deion Hayes, TJ Searcy, you've added some bodies at that edge position, and that was probably one of their biggest kind of places to kind of add that they needed to add. What fascinates me, though, is this tight end room. I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. A&M's now made 3 additions there, and they've kind of tried to go the run blocking route and address that with Mike O'Reilly and Nate Borkircher. And now you go get a guy to top it all off in Amari Nyblack, and didn't probably have the year or role that he wanted to have at Texas. probably still a guy that's not going to make a huge impact on the run blocking side. But I think you brought this guy in to be a receiving threat and to be a guy in the passing game that can really go out there and be a difference and be kind of a weapon for Colin Klein, because we talked about it a lot last fall that there were guys that went in spurts, right? Theo went in a spurt where he had some big games. He had a big catch against Florida. Trey Watson had some big games, but they didn't really have a guy that was consistently a receiving threat throughout the season. And so for me, I'm fascinated to see how they use Amari Niblack. I think that's a guy that obviously has some connections to Holman Wiggins. Probably the most athletic body they've added to that room since this staff got to College Station. And so I'm really fascinated to see how he kind of fits in, but address the secondary a little bit with Julian Humphrey and Jordan Shaw. I think those guys are both going to battle for starting spots right off the bat. I think Jordan Shaw is more of a nickel guy that can provide you some security with Tyreek Chappelle. And then you got Julian Humphrey that's uh, you know played some starting snaps for Georgia, was in a position battle there, and they're bringing him in to battle for a starting spot here, push Des Ricks alongside Will Lee, and they really need to kind of find somebody at that third spot. But wanted to get your thoughts on the tight end spot, because I think that's the most intriguing, tight end and wide receiver. What are your thoughts on what A&M's kind of done there?
Well, tight end, it was a position they had to upgrade
Yeah,
because not only is Theo your only returning tight end, uh, kind of crazy to think you only have one returning tight end because the
yeah.
guys who entered the portal and Watson going to the draft or expiring his eligibility. I guess they'll try to go to the draft, but
look, the excitement is sky high for Michael Early's first season in College Station as the head coach. Obviously, very familiar from being the hitting coach previously, and um, this team has got a ton of talent. You look at a lot of the preseason honors that have come out before the year. Obviously, Texas A&M ranked number one in multiple polls. Just a ton of excitement about this team, and so Michael Early and Hayden Schott met with the media on Wednesday. Just what were some of maybe your takeaways from getting to talk to them?
Yeah, I asked Hayden Schott, hey, how does it feel being preseason number one? Do y'all like that? How do you approach those expectations? And he's kind of like, I love it, man. Like, I love having the target on our back. I love that people think we're good. Like, we're not trying to shy away from that. And I think that's a great mindset to have. You don't want to, you hear about, I remember I asked, I think, Jim Schlossnagle about that 2 years ago after they went deep into the College World Series. And I remember he was kind of like, like he had more of a tentative answer about the expectations and taking it game by game. And I don't know, like that might be a good strategy, but I kind of personally like we like having the target on our back approach.
Yeah.
I think Michael Early, a few different notes. He just talked about obviously Hayden Schott, naming him as the 12th man. One thing I found pretty fascinating about that was there was not really this big ceremonious video of Michael Early surprising Hayden Schott and everyone's crying and everyone's hugging and all that kind of thing. There was nothing like that. It was just like a phone call, like, yeah, you're the 12th man. Like that was all it was. It was real nonchalant. And I think that speaks to, number one, everyone in America knew that Hayden Schott was going to be the 12th man this season. And two, the way they described it was, it's not about one person, it's about the team. And I thought that was pretty admirable that they didn't want to make it this big show. And even when they announced it on social media, it was just a graphic that said like introducing the 12th man. And I thought that was pretty interesting because usually you see those things become these big dramatic deals. Yeah. And Hayden had a lot of fun with A&M fans over the last few months, kind of leaking that he was the 12th man. And so I think he kind of did it his own way, being kind of the lighthearted guy that he is. So that was funny. Michael Early didn't really give too much of a timetable or idea of what the starting rotation will be. Said they have a lot of depth when it comes to kind of their righty relievers, and that's going to be a big focus over these next couple of weeks, is seeing kind of what the pecking order is there. But obviously, when it comes to the starting rotation, Ryan Prager's going to be your Friday starter, and you think that Justin Lampkin will be in that mix, and you've got plenty of guys that you can consider, but Prager's obviously the guy. But yeah, they start the year February 14th against Elon, a 3-game home series, and I think it was last year they started out 20-0. I'll be curious to see if they could make another run like that again, and they've got the talent to do it. And coming off that College World Series finals loss to Tennessee to make it all the way up to that point, that's been kind of the message that's kind of motivated this offseason, and that this is, they know how to get there now. Hayden Schott said it took a little bit of luck to get there. You have to string a lot of wins in a row to get there, but now they know how to do it, and now they're going to be kind of motivated to get back there, and they certainly have the talent to do so. So a good spring for the Aggies.
Very much so. When you look at this basketball roster and you got a top 15 squad in Buzz Williams, and you got an A&M baseball squad that's number one in the country, it's going to be a good spring, and plenty of excitement, and a lot to kind of look forward to. on the Texas A&M baseball, basketball front. And you know what? We're a month and a half away from spring practice getting underway as well. So a lot to be excited of. And thank you to Carter for joining us. His internet went out towards the end of the podcast, so I gave him some troubles there. But thank you to everybody for joining us. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We'll be back again to give a little bit more of an in-depth preview of the baseball season. Until then, take care, everybody, and have a good weekend, and we'll see you guys soon.